Okay, great. We'll call this meeting to order. Welcome, everyone. Any public comments to start with?
Congratulations to the planning staff and committees on getting a town plan transmitted to the select board last night.
Wow.
Oh, really? Nice.
Yep, it is
Awesome.
on its way.
Was it voted on? Or was it?
Yeah, it was well, not by the select board didn't vote on it, but
Yeah.
it was the planning commission voted to transmit.
Oh, okay, so that means the planning commission approved.
They're done, they've had their hearing, it's with the select board.
Cool. Congratulations. I don't see it on the agenda. Did you want to make a public comment about the email that you were,
About the call I got from Dan.
Yeah.
Power. Sure, I can, and I didn't know if you were gonna cover it in your.
I figured I was gonna mention it, but
Let's do it then.
Let's do it then.
Yeah, let's do it when
yeah, okay,
when
great.
your update.
Any other public comments? All right, let's move to the minutes. This was the part of the agenda I didn't get to last night, so if anyone else has a closer read of it.
I had one thing, and Laura, maybe you'll remember it better than I did, but one thing that I didn't see mentioned, the Green Up Day event report number 5 did talk about some of the other connections that people highlighted on the map. Pretty much the first one that somebody came up and mentioned, and it was like 2 people in a row, was following the Velco lines west to east to Catamount, and I know that came up last meeting, but I don't know when. I couldn't remember if it was during the Green Up Day readout or whether it was during the ERF prioritization, but that one came up multiple times with visitors to the Green Up Day table, and I thought it should, since we did bring it up at the meeting, I thought it should be reflected.
Yeah, that should be in there, yeah.
We didn't end up adding it to the, I don't believe, to the desired trail connection map.
But is that because it was already there?
I think it's already there.
It's already
It's there as a
kind of
desire.
there.
But it was mentioned a couple times.
Yeah. So I don't know, people were talking about wanting to cross-country ski that way. Anyway, that was one thing that I didn't see reflected in the minutes. I don't know that it's a big deal.
That's all private land, I believe, isn't it? I mean, speaking of those. I think that
It is, but if it's Velco, they have the right of way through there.
well, right, but
The land itself.
the land itself, they probably only have the access.
Yeah, it's already on there. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Then I think we could just leave it out. It's fine.
Well, I'm happy to add it in.
No.
If you'd like.
No, the only reason would be if like we sort of missed getting this connection here
Yeah.
from
It's there.
west to east. People wanted to be able to cross country ski to Catamount to go skiing on the trails.
Yeah.
And from neighborhoods along Mountain View. No, I think it's okay. It can stay out.
Okay.
I was just worried that if we missed getting it onto here, we should reflect it in some way in the minutes that we at least discussed it.
Yeah, I think it was helpful. So all the I was mentioning this during update, but all of the 5 submitted desired trails additions were added to the map.
Great.
And so this is the official map that will be included with the town plan, but also worth mentioning that it's not as if there isn't the possibility of adding and responding in real time to circumstances for other trails that might make sense.
Dave, could you hand me one of those?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind.
This is the map set. This is just the.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
That's the set.
that's the
Oh,
this is without the 5 additions.
That's what was already.
Yeah, that was what was proposed.
On very high quality paperboard.
Yeah.
yeah, that.
That already.
This is the map set that was used during public hearings.
Okay.
Town plan. It was available, I just grabbed it.
Okay. I thought that was maybe one more thing. At number 8, other business, it said that I suggested the commission discuss the topic of landscape buffers. I think what I was referring to during the meeting was that it should be part of the new member packet. some sort of Cliff Notes version of what it means when we talk about different types of landscape buffers.
I agree. I remember.
We could discuss it in a meeting, but just having it in the packet would be good enough for me. I'll take the time to read it.
So, would you like that amended to suggest that landscape buffers be included as a topic in the?
Yeah, that's what I was attempting to say last meeting.
Sure.
I didn't have any other.
Thanks, Reeves.
I'll move approval of the minutes as amended.
Okay, any other discussion of the minutes? Or can I get a second?
Second.
Excellent. I'm reading it very quickly here, but I'm not seeing anything, so. All those in favor of approving the minutes? Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, did I see Eric? I think Eric missed last
Aye.
week.
Sorry, that was a nod, a silent I.
Thank you. Perfect.
Great. I was just making some notes. Can you refresh me on who motioned and who?
I motioned and Laura seconded it.
Thank you.
Excellent. All
Now
right.
we see Eric.
I'm just pulling the agenda back up. So we have conservation, we have planner updates, and then we're gonna spend the majority of our discretionary time today talking about commission orientation materials. And so that should be a pretty broad discussion about creating a website that just kind of is like an overview of what the commission does and could serve as both orientation for us as well as members of the public. Then we have a pretty extensive pre-app review to go through for the Chittenden Solid Waste District. And then we'll close out with talking about next agenda topics. Anything else to add to that agenda? Okay, let's get our conservation planner update.
Great. So yeah, just a couple things this week. The trip out to the Allenbrook Bridge site was unfortunately canceled. One of the important players could not make it. So it's yet to be rescheduled, but it's something we'll be following up on today. Would love to keep that moving along. In related news, our signs keep getting ripped down in terms of keeping that closed.
Oh.
We just can't keep people off it. So
it's not closed if the signs aren't there?
yeah, well, there still is a partial wooden barrier in place.
Yeah,
So
that's what
people
they're
have to
moving it.
step over it.
Okay,
But yeah, by all accounts, there's really no keeping people off it. They feel very entitled to use it in place. So I'm gonna continue to replace signs on a periodic basis, but I also intend to ask, when that site visit occurs, if it would make sense to, simply remove that damaged sagging section of the bridge in the short term, because it's only continuing to get worse. So I
Does
think
that mean people won't be able to get across then?
that would mean people would not be able to
I
get
haven't
across.
seen it.
There'd be a gap, yeah.
Yeah,
If
so
it
that
would
might be
be,
more dangerous in some ways if people say, oh, now I gotta scramble down in there and get over to the other side.
I think, yeah, I mean, it'd be a fair discussion. I would like to know, if it wouldn't be prohibitively costly. It might be worth taking that action. Simply because right now, if people are scrambling down across the river, that's not ideal.
All the traffic, then.
Let me turn on. Hey, Eric and Reed, can you hear us now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Sorry about the technical difficulties. The second computer that we usually run from dropped and is frozen. I'm not entirely sure what happened. So we're just rerouting things through one computer so we
Okay, no worries.
avoid sudden technical difficulties.
Or the visual. Go.
Our guests join.
Yep, Al's working.
Okay, we're just getting our own visuals back up.
All
Okay,
right,
we're here.
great. Fortunately, the gym is a little lighter today, so we've got a little more time. Okay. I think we're back on track.
Great.
All right, so I just was giving a quick update that unfortunately there is no news regarding the Allenbrook Bridge. That meeting with the engineers and the builder was canceled and hopefully be rescheduled soon. So I'll follow up when there's information on that. I do not know if the recent rain caused any additional damage.
Well, that was my question.
Oh yeah, I do not know. but
Okay.
It's fair to assess, fair question to ask, and I'll see if I can get any info.
Luckily, it's been sort of like a long, slow, rainy period as opposed to like one giant storm, but
If you've seen,
there's been some.
if you've gone over the highway at any point and seen the water going over the Winooski, it is,
Yeah.
Huge, and
There is
Yeah.
there's a lot of water moving through that,
yeah,
the falls there that you can see from 89.
yeah. Yeah, and it's
Uh,
it's a massive amount of drainage going on right now.
Mhm.
Yeah, I do hope that we avoid any further inundating storms.
Yeah.
Because it's gonna be repeat of last year. We get
Mhm.
if we do.
A couple other things. So I mentioned that the map changes were submitted. We recoded the Burnett property from park and conservation land to just town land.
Mhm.
And we added those 5 requested desired trails. That was all accepted. WVPD is good. We had a check-in on the calendar for today. Probably would have been pretty tight to fit them in, but we decided it'd be better to aim for next meeting. Part of the reason is because we have a conversation tomorrow with Global Foundries to check in about what the scenario is for them. We know that they lost some pretty significant funding that was supposed to come to them through the CHIPS Act related to federal circumstances.
really?
So, yeah, so that could potentially influence. Hopefully, it doesn't. But that could potentially influence kind of their timeline or what they're dealing with.
Certainly the distraction of
Yeah,
the other
certainly
issues.
more important things to
Yeah.
worry about.
a distraction. But this will be my first opportunity to meet them, and Nick Warner and Tim Larned from WVPD will be there just for a Zoom meeting. So get an opportunity to touch base with them and looking forward to them reporting back. And so Nick and Tim will join us on 4th, and we can talk about Jacob Krantz if we want to have any activities out there this spring or summer, and hopefully there'll be an update potentially on what access could look like in the future.
Dave, on that topic, do you know if your meeting is with the Global Foundries attorneys or if the Park District attorneys will be there?
I don't believe there'll be any attorneys present.
Okay.
I think this is just an opportunity to sort of reestablish the
Okay,
communication channels and get an update on kind of what their situation is and whether what was in discussion is kind of still in play.
yeah, okay, so that sounds like the last update that we got from Nick or Tim. Nick usually gives the more material, like sort of process updates. Tim is usually more of the boots on the ground. So my guess is that their attorneys have not been successful in working out the sort of formal structure of the arrangement. So I guess guidance that I could provide to you is that it would be good to know if Global Foundry still is in it, obviously. But that, they need to make time for their attorneys to meet with the Park District attorneys and I think at this point, Nick would probably say that it's, you know, it always has been a huge priority for them, but like. I think their attorney is like a volunteer and not even
Mhm.
under contract with them potentially. I'm not sure. But the update that we were getting throughout the end of last year was basically that like they're trying to like make that legal and sort of formal connection.
Okay, that's helpful to know.
But obviously, if you're just meeting with the Global Foundries folks, it sounds like it's just like a point of reconnection to just like make sure that we're all sort of like still singing the same song.
Right. That's the impression I've gotten, is that there hasn't really been much contact
Yeah.
as of late, so this is kind of reestablishing that.
Okay.
But that's duly noted, and I'll keep that in mind, because that'll be useful in terms of, you know, if they still think the plan is viable, then
Yeah.
that's really next steps. And, you know, I can offer capacity from the town angle to help out with that.
Yeah, that'd be great. I mean, the parking lot's still there.
Yeah.
That hasn't gone anywhere. The
Yeah.
Access still looks exactly the same.
Okay, yeah, so Reed, do you want to talk at all about, you want to give a little bit of just a quick backstory on the LeClaire property?
Sure, I got a phone call Friday from Dan Boomhauer.
How do you know Dan? Just through your,
He called me.
okay, interesting.
I talked to him a little bit around the Wild Wild Williston event 2 Decembers, right? 2 Decembers ago. Yeah, we're not at December 25, so yeah, December of 2023, we had talked in part because just the planning of the event and making sure he could be there. I think I had called him and talked to him about it and stuff. So
Okay,
somehow he had my number. He called me.
cool.
He said, "Hey, I know somebody who's going to be selling land. It sounds like it's maybe part of an estate dealings or something, and so it is off of Lincoln Road. I don't know if you can just pull up like a Google Maps, David, and to see where that is for folks, but it's across from Butternut, and it goes up to the base of Brownell Mountain.
Hmm.
And Dan says Mike LeClaire would be the person to talk to. Dan has been talking to Mike. He's been, it sounds like, just kind of encouraging him to be open to maybe involvement in the town.
Do we know what parcel this is that? Cause that's what I was looking
It's
at.
this one right here.
So it's almost connected.
Yeah, it's adjacent to the,
Hey, Dave, are you able to share your screen?
Oh, yeah, that would be good.
thank you.
So you were able to figure out which one was owned by the LeClaire family?
Yep, this is the LeClaire parcel right here.
Yeah, so it has, according to Dan, it's been logged recently. It is wooded. There are no homes on the parcel. There you go. It's a little easier to see.
Is that top?
It goes
Yeah, it
right-
goes straight to the top. Exactly.
Oh, it does. But it's not quite
It
connected.
doesn't quite connect. I don't know, the 022,000 there, that tiny little thing, I think that might be owned by the communications.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's where the tower is, right?
Yeah,
It's the communications place,
Yeah.
but there might be easy
It's
easement
flat right
across
there.
that.
Yeah.
It's right at the top is where the communications towers are. Anyway, so there is a road.
Yeah.
That's being used, that's being leased by the communications folks to get up and service it. And it goes from Lincoln Road up through that part.
Oh, okay.
So there's,
So it doesn't follow their, cause they have a right of way for for their line. Going down towards, I don't know, I don't even know how to pronounce that, Chalcuts?
Oh, yeah, that other.
yeah, you can.
Yeah,
You
so
kinda
like
see
that's,
it.
and I've seen that from the road, is that's like a wire road.
Yeah, so
Whatever.
supposedly there's some sort of access up that's used for servicing the towers.
I'll believe it.
Now, Dan, the reason Dan brought it up is he said, I know he knew that Brown Mountain has been kind of inaccessible.
Yep.
He said there used to be a ski area on the mountain,
That's how I know.
and that this parcel was part of that ski area.
Oh, really?
So is there potential for a parking lot too?
And
That's
well,
one thing we struggle
so
with.
he
on-
said, you know, this could provide access, it could give you space to run a trail to the top. And his biggest sort of selling point for paying attention to this is he said, you know, it would relieve a lot of pressure on Sucker Brook if there was another vista hike or mountain hike along 2A. Times when the parking lot gets overflowing, people would have somewhere else. Oh, I'll just go down to Brown Hill Mountain and hike
how
that
much land
today
it is?
instead.
You know how big that plot
I
is?
think it's 35 or actually, no, maybe smaller than that, between 20 and 30, we can confirm.
You could check the polygon, yeah.
Uh,
Well, it's a great forested area that it would be great not to have it be developed.
Yeah.
20 acres.
Yeah, I wonder how heavily logged it is.
He
It
said if
was.
the town were to own the property and put in a hiking trail, it could take a lot of pressure off Sucker Brook and Five Tree Hill. It also could address parking problems currently with using Brown Mountain. And he did also mention kind of on a side note that they did complete a conservation transfer of development rights deal for the rest of the Boomhauer property in the last year, and they did that through the Lake Champlain Land Trust rather than BLT or TPL.
Oh, is that the
And
piece? It's
he's-
like 100 acres? or-
Yeah, and he said it's the first, it's Lake Champlain Land Trust's first land deal that's not adjacent to the lake. And he said they're actually interested in doing more, and so he said that there's potential that they would be
Do
interested
you
in
know any of the details of that? Like, are they gonna allow hiking trails through there or?
Oh, I don't, he didn't go into details about their 100
There
acres.
there are trails through there, a lot of trails through there
Yeah.
now, and I just wonder how many we can legalize.
Well, that could be a separate conversation with Dan, but
Yeah.
but his point was just regarding our general conversation about land trusts that he's had a great experience with Lake Champlain Land Trust, and they seem interested in continuing to look at more land conservation projects.
And a reminder that Fellowship met with us to say, how can we get mountain bike trails there? Because we're already mountain biking there. You know,
At Brown
there's a lot of
Island?
parking. Yeah,
Oh, on
Oh.
Brown on that.
yeah, in Brown Island Mountain.
I did not know that.
I think you were there. But this
I
is
probably-
just a memory I have. It could be a wrong memory. I just remember the problem was there was no parking and sorry, we can't help you.
Oh, okay.
And do they have permission to bike through there, or is it just, they're just
No,
off?
which is a
They
pretty
just-
dubious argument.
They just
We are
live
having
there.
issues.
Oh,
They live there.
they're
and-
back to their old ways there, it sounds
I'm
like.
kind of with Dave on that one. It's
Yeah.
like mountain bikers tend to just go where they wanna go.
Yeah, and cut trees where they wanna go.
Well, it's just families that live there, right? And
Yeah.
that's-
Right.
So Dan said that the final thing I'll say is that Dan, he felt a little bit urgent about it because he said that the other neighbors along Lincoln Road probably have the means and interest to purchase it in order to prevent further development on the road.
Oh,
And so he said it might be something that if we are interested in, we should act relatively quickly to have a conversation with
if we want a trail.
Michael Claire and.
But also perhaps partnering with the local people, as long
Or-
as,
or-
you know, if they
or
help
what?
pay for it and we can get a trail through it and maybe a parking lot at the base. As a
Yeah.
result of that, it might be cheaper for the town.
I get the feeling that Dan has a hunch they're not interested in people coming and parking
Yeah.
on the road.
That's kind of what I.
That's
Okay.
why they wanna purchase it.
Which might be the reason to purchase it and prevent
Yeah.
activity. They just wanna keep it quiet, so, and that's something that we need to be mindful of.
That's true.
Anytime we're thinking about putting in recreational resource.
Yeah, sure.
Or even if we're just looking to conserve and not
Mhm.
put recreational use in, we should be mindful of what the neighbors are used to and what they value about the land.
Has anyone actually been on Lincoln Road to see the access point? I'm curious if,
No, but
presumably, like, people are not being towed if they park their car at Lincoln Road and walk up.
I imagine
the road.
it's legal to park on the side of that road. It's a
Is it a
It's a
dirt road?
decent size dirt or gravel road, I believe.
Okay.
I think it's dirt road, yeah.
Is there enough of a shoulder there to pull off? Often these dirt roads these hilly dirt roads, there's not a lot of shoulder,
Yeah.
and there's often a ditch that you could drop into if you're not careful.
Yeah, I'm looking at it from just Google aerial photos, and it looks like it's decently wide and pretty defined. I would say probably 3 cars wide. So
All right, well that could work.
Are you talking about the log landing? Or?
Lincoln Road. Just looking at the aerials of Lincoln Road, it looks like it's a pretty well-maintained dirt road, and
That's a log landing right there, Dave?
That's most likely a log landing
Yeah, which-
on the parcel itself.
Yeah,
Like,
it
it's
is.
not-
Which may be a great place for a parking lot,
Yeah.
potentially, if
Right.
that's what it looks like as you drive past it. Yeah. On Lincoln Road.
100%.
I've never been there. I would love to go out and look at it. If
Yeah.
Mike Leclerc does want to engage with us, I'd be happy to go look at it with David or anybody else who's interested, because I've never even been down there. but I don't know.
I would definitely.
Here you
be
can see
interested in
that
too.
this, it looks like this is the
That's probably
road,
it, yeah.
the service road
service.
Oh, yeah.
on the
So is
side.
that right by the property?
And a service road, you think about like Mount Philo. The service road allows a lot more people to be able to use it
Mhm.
because they don't have to worry about.
Cliffs or anything.
Yeah, it's gonna be a steady, gentle incline, it's gonna be relatively
Mhm.
flat, there's not gonna be steps. If you have trouble maybe physically, but you still wanna do a hike that's vertical, so.
I wonder if there's a room for parking along the side of
Uh,
that service road.
Yeah, so anyway, there's some promise to it. I know we're talking about how we want to use the ERF now that we have some stronger funding coming our way, and this is an interesting.
I think that's got a lot of
So
promise.
I think, David, you are just awaiting.
Yeah,
specific
I've just,
contact
you know,
information.
the only contact information we've been given so far is email, so I've reached out and I'll be following up today and,
With Leclerc?
yeah,
And I left a
And-
message for Dan asking
Yeah,
for a
reach
phone
out to
number
Dan.
if he's able to provide it.
yeah.
And
yeah.
Dan could maybe meet us too. He-
Sure.
Yeah, having
He
that
said he knows
connection
that
would be
He
great.
knows the parcel, yeah.
Right, he
Yeah.
knows.
I think that sounds really promising,
Yeah.
yeah. Solve some issues we've had for years about potentially, you
Potentially,
know,
yeah.
to get access as well as parking. We've
And how-
struggled to try to figuring out where to.
It's relatively flat at the
Yeah,
bottom.
I mean,
too.
if you look at the topography, this is definitely the side of the mountain that makes sense to put an access trail on. If you were gonna put a hike up to the top.
It's
You know, that
more
access
gradual.
road goes right up this ridge.
And it
And
comes down
then
that
down, you know, this corner, which is pretty
And we
good.
still have that
Yeah,
other
you
trail
think.
too. I mean, we can use that trail, just, there's no parking, but that's what we
Right.
struggle
Yeah,
with,
people
finding a
could
place to
hike over
park.
and back
Yeah.
or something. or-
Where's the other? trail?
Right near.
We did the stream,
Strawberry
right?
Brook there, and
Yeah.
it's really wet around there, and we,
Mm.
for years, we looked at, how can we put a parking lot in here, we
There's like a
just
little
couldn't find a way.
tiny poison ivy covered access bridge. here.
Yeah, but there's no place for a flat parking lot that isn't in a
And
wetland.
Melinda looked and looked and looked,
Yeah.
talked to neighbors, and
Yeah,
it just.
Yeah,
we looked at the other side of the road, potentially, we looked at all kinds of stuff.
I was asking about, there's a substation right here.
Yeah,
It could potentially provide access, but there must be an easement to go across this private property, so that'll have to be
Yeah.
something that we discuss.
Mhm.
But I know that,
But avoiding
in
crossing the Sutter
Stowe,
Brook anyway.
they have, some access to Katy Hill Town Forest from substation property.
Mhm.
I look at that one though, and I think, wow, the Leclerc one looks way
A
better.
lot more,
That one you
lot
have
less
to cross
complicated.
Right,
two
exactly.
streams and stream
Yeah,
crossings.
you
are
need
pretty
bridges, and
Right, it's
expensive.
definitely a puzzle, for sure.
I think that's cool.
But anyway,
Good
it's a
option.
cool development. It's kind of Dan to be looking at for continuing to do conservation work. And he
Mhm.
said he encouraged us regardless to talk to Lake Champlain Land Trust as we think about other.
That's a great idea.
If you hear from Dan Reed, can you ask him about, you know, what are the plans for that 100 acres that he just dealt with?
I can ask him, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what,
where are those 100?
how can we work to, that's the one off of Five Tree Hill, right?
It's, yeah,
It's-
yeah, that one there.
I don't know why this one won't let me select parcels. It would be this. 110.7
Yeah,
acres.
it now has a conservation
Right,
easement
yeah,
on it.
that's the
and,
one.
And there, yeah, sure, there's existing trails, that.
Yeah.
Family and friends use and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I use them. I mean, a lot of people in our neighborhood walk through there.
And
Daily or
the
weekly.
red dotted line is the, hiking trail, right? Yeah, Sucker Brook.
Right,
Trail.
this is the 5 Tree Hill to Sucker Brook.
Yeah. So that just kind of gives you the perspective
Oh,
from
yeah,
the trail.
thanks.
Where are we talking about? Like
Yeah.
when you're at the top and you're looking toward the lake, you're looking
Yeah,
right over
Yeah,
top
right,
of that.
right over his property.
Got it.
So the good news is that's not gonna be developed for you.
Yeah, that is good.
And if, I've been talking a lot about trying to make a connection down to the growth center. And that's in between the Sucker Brook and the growth center, and Dan has experience working with the town to try to provide access to things, so that could be helpful.
Mhm.
Okay,
Anyway, that's the update.
puzzle piece, but
Yeah.
certainly promising. Okay, thanks for that, agenda topic, Reed. And, anything else you wanted to cover, Dave?
Let's move on. We can always
Okay.
fit it. Nothing else important. A couple of things I could mention, if we have time, I could give a little update on what's been going on with the Catamount Community Forest.
Okay.
But can save that.
Excellent, then let's move on to our next topic, which we have about half an hour for now at this point. The commission is expecting to have at least one or two new members. I know when I being the latest commissioner to have joined now 2 years ago, an orientation packet would have been nice.
Would have been nice 30 years.
I
Yeah.
take responsibility for that. It's been on my to-do list for years and haven't gotten there.
So
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I think the idea here, as Dave and I were talking about agenda setting, was to kind of think about this as a more of a public facing resource, something about, more like a about the WCC kind of, website based resource, and thinking about the types of materials that we could drop in there, rather than like having something saved in like a town file, but then just like, someone gets like 50 pages of printouts. Like nobody wants 50 pages of printouts when you join the Conservation Commission, but a nice website that you can just sort of like quickly scroll through.
Yeah.
Sort of makes the most sense to me.
Right.
So I don't know, Dave, if you have any sort of thoughts on how you would start this conversation.
Yeah, sure. So I basically thought it'd be helpful to kind of take a quick tour through the materials that are on the website that basically, de facto is the public facing presence for, conservation in Williston. Whether it's Conservation Commission or it's just sort of under the umbrella of our natural resources page. And we can think about how we might want to restructure that to have, either a more official landing page for the commission, or kind of consolidating some resources in a way that would make it more effective for a new member to kind of upload onboard, a whole bunch of new information pertaining to becoming a commissioner and getting involved in a more substantial way. But before that, I also just wanted to share for fun a couple of things that I found in the files, non-digitized resource. First of all, April 1987 copy or page of the Williston Whistle,
Oh,
which declares Conservation Commission to be appointed.
Wow.
The selectmen
nice.
have
What date
authorized
is
to
that?
appoint a Conservation Commission to work with the Planning Commission in identifying and conserving Williston's land resources in order to preserve the character and atmosphere of the town, and thus increase the desirability of Williston for present and future residents.
April of 87.
April 1987, this is in reference to the March 23rd town hall. And I also have a printout here of the town meeting on March 2nd, 1987, that says, voted to request and authorize the selectmen to appoint a conservation committee or a conservation commission to work with the planning commission in identifying and conserving Williston's resources.
nice.
So we have the date confirmed. It's 1987. Got some.
And I believe it was Dan
Resources.
Blumenauer who, he told me that somebody leaned over to him and said, I think it was when the ERF was established. It was being considered, and they said, we're gonna have an ERF, we need to have a conservation commission to guide.
Oh,
And
yeah.
and somebody nudged him and said, make a motion to create one. And he
Oh,
did, and that's
yeah.
how we
Oh, is
ended
that how
up,
it
yeah.
started? Huh.
Wow, that's great.
So I thought ERF came after the commission.
It was
Maybe.
created after, I think they were talking about,
Okay.
Well, 87 would definitely predate the ERF.
Yeah.
it was 89 that the ERF was voted
Yeah,
to
90.
establish, so it was right in the same kind of time frame.
That's neat. It'd be interesting to learn who the first group of WCCC commissioners were.
Well, I have I have
Wasn't you?
a couple other
Yeah,
files
so
here.
funny. Dennis Bates might have been.
It said in, this just is a handwritten note that says in 87, there were commissioners listed, but there was no annual report. And then this is a conservation of what has been therefore presumably the first annual report in 1988. Respectfully
It's a big year.
submitted by
Yeah.
Richard Park,
Oh, yeah,
Chairman, Dennis Bates,
yeah.
George Little, James McCullough, and
That's
Yeah.
not surprising.
Rosalie Ozol. Or Ozol.
I don't know.
Yeah, Jim was on that initial.
It was nice. So I thought I'd
Yeah, I knew
just
Dennis.
pass this file around. I think it's pretty cool to check those out.
Yeah,
And then we can take a kind of a quick tour through the web resources that are up there. And talk about, how we might want to, where you might want to host it, how we might want to structure it. So the first thing is, all the boards and commissions and committees have a landing page. But you'll notice that they're really just used to identify, currently at least, who's on those committees, some contact information, and provide a link to agendas and minutes. That's the current structure for all of these.
I didn't realize non-Williston residents could sit on the DRB. Did I?
Yes, yeah, they're allowed to,
is that right?
it's
I
an,
was just
Surprised.
yes, it's in order to allow, I believe, for skills that might not necessarily be in
Right.
Williston residency,
Huh.
so people can apply from outside.
So is that just the DRB that they
Yeah,
can,
only
but not
DRB.
the other commissions?
Correct.
No, I'm pretty sure that the rule for other commissions is that it simply has to have a majority of Williston residents.
That's what I heard
That's
that.
interesting. Yeah, it is kind of wild.
I believe that's the case.
Okay.
Sure.
Well, you really gotta want it to join.
Yeah, well, if you've got ulterior motives,
Yeah,
if
like
you're a developer or something, or that
that's
wanna work.
That's more what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Or maybe you value the natural resources of the
yeah.
town and you live close by.
Yeah.
So
That could,
what I
if
will
if
say-
that applies to other, if that's like a statewide rule and that applies to all of the towns of Vermont, that could help the smaller towns that have a smaller population base to draw from, the more rural towns.
Mhm.
That's a great point, Eric. Yeah, I believe that does originate from state statute.
Oh.
So.
We interrupt you.
Oh, no, I was just gonna say, so currently, this is really just a landing page for here are the members and, visit our minutes, but. This could potentially, we could add a sub-page from this, we could add some links or information on this, so this
Yeah.
could be the landing page.
Mhm.
You'll notice that for the Catamount Community Forest Management Committee. They essentially do just that, so a
Mhm.
list of the members, this is the sort of. Intro blurb, but then they have links
Oh, yeah.
to various resources.
Yeah,
about
I
it.
like that.
Now, the Conservation Commission, in terms of what we do, we have the added benefit of, there's a whole section of the website that is devoted to natural resources. And
Yeah.
so there is pages that already kind of address some of the things that we would probably be interested in putting about this. Trails, streams, hunting, wetlands, wildlife, watershed protection buffers, and we've used this to put up some of the pages that I believe the Conservation Commission has
The
probably
ERF,
created in
With
the
all
past.
of our Williston.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the no
Well, that
more.
would be ERF. So that has been used for those purposes as well.
Look at those results.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just have to say while we're there. I wanna spend more time with this sometime, but I wanna pass it on in case anybody wants to
Yeah, that is.
get a quick
So-
peruse.
Another thing is we have this current conservation initiatives page, which has not been updated in a couple of years. And many of these pages are, gradually going out of date. They're put up 2 years ago, they put up 3 years ago and haven't really been revisited.
Seems like we
So,
need an archive page that says like past events and initiatives or something, and
Mhm.
has everything that's not from the last 48 months.
yeah,
I like
Sure.
that read, and as soon as Dave flipped over to this one, my first thought was the more content that we put up on the website means that much more content we have to maintain and keep up to date. So let's keep that in perspective too,
yeah.
because it does get out of date very quickly.
And people respond so much more, like the story map on this one is so much more engaging than the Abazim and Ahanek. So the story map has pictures, you can click on things. The top bit is just paragraphs of information, and that, it's accurate. I think it's important that it's there because we are, as a town, moving toward that becoming a community resource. But where are the pictures? We need pictures and maps, and like that's what people
Mhm.
are interested in and not interested in text.
Right.
So in the interest of keeping this oriented around a new commissioner, though, I guess. True, when I onboarded, I was looking at a lot of these. And this is all very like public facing as far as like how to navigate various things, whether you're interested in Wild About Williston or whatever. I was thinking that what is needed is like an orientation to like like what bylaws are relevant to the commission. What is the sort of like primary function of the commission in reviewing applicants, and like what are the key criteria? So like not fair enough, like the public is interested in those storyboards and like the storytelling aspect of it. But I was just kind of like much more
Operationally.
operational, like what the heck does this?
When do I need to show up? What do we talk about?
Well,
What do I need to read?
don't get me going on 7 a.m. showing up part read. But
I mean, that is there for people who are thinking about joining is 7 to 9 a.m.
yeah.
But to your
Yeah.
point, like,
Maybe we
letting
should
those
bold
people-
that and underline it and make it a larger font.
Yeah. Put it in red in italics.
Yeah.
Looking spooky dripping red.
So my point is that like the bylaws that we look at, the sort of levels of review, the sort of overall responsibilities of the commission. That's
where do
gonna
we
be
fall on the
Yeah.
DRB process? Like, when are we consulted and why?
right, right.
Yeah, I think that could absolutely go here. We could simply create a break, or even consolidate. Do you have bios? Oh, you've got bios. That's so cool.
I don't think I do.
Okay. You could just open
Right.
auras and said that's so
Yeah.
cute. Is it?
I think we had to submit them somewhere along the line when we were up for
That's great.
vote to come on the commission or something.
Oh man, I'm totally gonna
Where's
be
David's?
delinquent. All right, okay. I'll own that. Dave, I'll send you a bio.
You knew that was coming,
Yeah, I
didn't you?
did.
That's great. Okay. I didn't realize that those
Just steal
links.
Gary's photo.
What's that?
You can have your photo when you
Oh,
go.
So, yeah, we could consolidate this and then create a break and have a page to kind of those or a link to a subpage that houses
Yeah.
those materials that.
Yeah, and to Eric's point, something that's not dynamic and sort of
Right.
Yeah, can stand the test of time, right?
Yeah.
Well, fortunately, I think with what we're talking about here, we're talking about really, more than just an informational webpage. This is sort of a repository for documents that are important to understanding how the commission works. So not material that's really going to go out of date quickly.
yeah.
This page has one paragraph about the Conservation Commission. It seems like we could pretty easily add a couple little nuggets from what you've dug up from history, like why was it created? What was its initial? Like there might be a couple like interesting things about how it came to be that could go on this page in my mind, and then there needs to be like you said, a link that says, what does the Conservation Commission do? Right, and then you go there and it's like, okay, this is the nitty gritty from bylaw references and process flows of when pre-apps and stuff come to us, and then the proactive stuff we do with planning, mapping, prioritizing.
Now, like, why doesn't the DRB have something like what we're talking about? Because the DRB seems like it would be even more important for people to like
Mhm.
know what that process is, because we've had so many people come through. And
So accessible.
I think it's because it's in the bylaw, like their book is the bylaw. That's their like, it says what they do, when they do it, what people have to provide. There was a really cool like conceptual process flow that I think Emily and Melinda put together years ago, like 3 years ago, that said, how do projects, it was when Blazer, I think, was proposed, and everybody was like, all of a sudden, like, wait, how does our process work as a town? Because they didn't
Mhm.
know. And I think they created a really cool visual that said, if somebody wants to do something, this is what happens. They talk to staff, they go through pre-app, they go
Mhm.
through discretionary, they have to go through, they might have to go through growth management pointing system.
that would be, I agree.
That would be cool.
That would be
to
good.
get up here.
Yeah.
If it's still accurate, or if it needs to be just touched up.
I have a hard copy of that.
It's gotten a little trickier because now with Taft Corners zoning district
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
the form-based code governing that, the rules are always like, this is what the rules are, except for Taft Corners.
Right, yeah.
There's like a little asterisk needs to go everywhere because it's all different. There's no growth management and things are.
So let's
redefined.
list out a little bit, and I can kind of make a running list. Things that, you know, we put out some ideas, but let's sort of, make it a little more official.
Mm.
And list out some of these things that that you'd like to see on the website, so.
I would like to see a mini timeline of when were we created?
Yeah.
When was the ERF established?
A lot of that's in there. I just read through.
Just like a little
Yeah.
timeline of sorts.
Maybe I missed this because I was focusing on that, but somewhere is there a town mandate of what the Conservation Commission is supposed to do?
Right, like a charter.
Like a charter?
Yeah.
Does such a thing exist?
State
I
statute.
mean, I think that paragraph that is going around, like, that is the intention statement for it.
That'd be
And
nice to have right up front too.
There might have been
this
changes.
goal statement, I think, is sort of an addendum to that,
Okay.
if you will, that is basically
Yeah.
expanding on, you know, how are we gonna meet those objectives?
Does the goal statement mention the state statute? Was it Article 24 or something?
I don't think it lists.
That'd be a
Oh, yes, it
place
does.
for
that one, I
As
think that-
enabled by VSA.
There we go, yeah, title 24.
After 118.
So I think the reason we have never been presented with like, oh, here's your charter is because our charter is whatever state statute, state.
Right,
whatever
but that'd be
Title
a place
24
to
says.
start.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it should at least link to it and say.
Generally what you gotta do, and here's how we do it.
Yeah, and I think it will say if you were to go to the state website and go to Title 24, Chapter 118, it would tell you, here's what a conservation commission is, and in Vermont, here's what it can do.
Mhm.
Right, and it may be different than this, because that's.
It could have changed.
30-something years
Yeah.
old. Yeah,
Right.
Yeah, those sections definitely changed.
evolve, yeah.
I know it does things like say that we can, like. Receive monies, right? Like there's special
right.
powers that
Yeah.
the state gives conservation commissions, whereas other committees can't necessarily do that.
On that point, I think the statutory reference would also be an
Yeah.
important
Yeah, we can link that.
piece of material as well.
Okay.
Well, it's like we don't have to update ourselves, which is
Yeah.
nice.
So as I was just sort of pulling up those whatever the DRB, the Unified Development Bylaw. I would really appreciate if this resource contained any references to the Conservation Commission within that bylaw. So like, I just pulled up the administrative permit procedure for an example. And like, here's an important reference. The administrator may refer proposals for minor changes or revisions to approved developments to the Conservation Commission for review and comment before making a decision, right? So like,
That's how work comes to us.
right,
Mhm.
exactly. So like understanding where we show up in those bylaws as, and like kind of to this point that Reed was making is that like the town planning office has created a workflow that makes those bylaws functional.
Mhm.
And so being able to like point to here's where your sort of duties get delineated. I'm trying to say that as well as.
Think if it was a process flow, where are your start activities? Our start activity is like somebody submits a pre-app.
Yeah,
Or
yeah,
the DRB says, oh, we need Conservation Commission to weigh in on this or that.
so that was my, I'm actually surprised we're not referenced more directly,
You're right, so the Conservation Commission is referenced directly in a number of bylaws.
right,
Yeah, chapter 27 and 29 being the most relevant, I'd say.
It
yeah,
would also be good, if we're referencing things like that, would be, to reference. In the new comprehensive plan, the new town plan, reference, if you're looking to see what types of things the Conservation Commission. Is gonna be working on over the next 8 years, because to your point, Eric, we don't wanna update this like every month. But something like a comprehensive plan, we could reference and say, for. This comprehensive plan, look in sections, blah, 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 and that's where you're gonna see. Conservation goals and activities listed.
Yeah. You could do a paged link to the town plan that jumps right to
The
chapter
door page, yeah.
13.
yeah.
Yeah, that would be really helpful for people to know like what the future looks like.
Did
I
you
just
know-
found,
Go
I
ahead,
found
Eric.
some notes that I made when I was thinking about this a few years ago. And Dave, I just dropped them into the chat to you.
Okay.
That I thought at the time would be important for incoming members to be aware of or think about.
Oh, thanks, Eric.
Let's take a quick look at the chat.
Oh, wow.
Great. Yeah, general responsibilities, review development subdivision proposals through conservation lens. Suite of bylaws that apply to WCC trails planning and management. Conservation of parks, ERF. Town plan update, water quality, yep, trapping, hunting dogs. Complaints, county forester. Yeah, I think we can definitely have a list that takes these points and adds a couple others in terms of like, what is the scope of work? Thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks, Eric.
Yep.
That makes me think about what I posted back in October, trying to encourage people to join, and it might be useful from the perspective of somebody thinking about, is the Conservation Commission something that I would want to serve on? It might be helpful to list like, here are the types of interests and or skills that lend themselves to serving on the Conservation Commission. Not that somebody without those skills can't come learn those things, but that I had listed some in my post. I said things like if you have interest and or expertise in areas like land conservation, primitive trails, development review, compliance, forestry, watershed health, ecology, just like listing out, if any of these things are kind of like, oh yeah, that's interesting to me, then those are the types of topics you're going to be dealing with on the commission.
I think my thought on that is, I think we'll kind of accomplish that with a clear list of what the Conservation Commission does.
Okay.
Without potentially
I don't want to
clouding the idea of like,
discourage anybody.
yeah, like
Yeah.
you probably shouldn't do this unless you have experience in these areas, or
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
even unintentionally discouraging someone with like a pretty different perspective.
That's a good point.
There's a consistency with how the other commissions have structured their opening websites too, that I think makes, we don't. I'm just kind of scrolling through DRB and the planning commission and everything, like they all have like a basic setup, like it's more than this, but it's not a whole lot more, you know,
Right.
so like.
I got one page.
Yeah, so like I think on our landing page, we could probably do something more to sort of say what we do or whatever. Or like link to things like Wild about Williston or something, because there's a yeah, like emails, drop off contact information, like we could definitely do some more around that. But then I think that if you had a link in our page that was like kind of like an about us almost, or like about the Conservation Commission, or how the Conservation Commission uses ERF funds or something like that, that links to that sort of, yeah, it would probably be an about us, is my guess, is like, what does the Conservation Commission do? And then as I see it, we kind of have two major responsibilities, ERF, and then this role in the bylaw for the approval of things. And then there's a bunch of other stuff here there that Eric just dropped, which seem really relevant, but also like not, as from my experience, not part of the day-to-day of what the commissioners do. Eric, do you agree with that assessment? Like, because it looked, yeah.
Oh yeah, that was just like what we were working on at that point in time. So like at that point, we were working on the trapping policy.
Okay.
But some of that is
We were working
Dave.
with Ethan
Yeah.
and the county forester a lot at that point, I think on catamount stuff.
Yeah. Well, I would want to avoid you pigeonholing yourself too
Yeah.
much, because while in Williston, those are the official sort of mandates that are handed to you. You really do have a wider latitude to engage more with other things. Like that whole list of activities. And I think there is, different towns work very differently based on how much structure they have to support their conservation commissions. And in some towns, it's really just like wide open drawing board. What are you interested in? Like organize how you will, because we have no resources to support you. So
Whatever you're willing to do.
yeah, whatever you're willing to do, and
You're
those
volunteers.
conservation commissions end up doing a lot more of this other kinds of work. I think in Williston, we're fortunate in that you have a lot of support, and you have connections with grassroots organizations like Sustainable Williston, and some of these other organizations. But I think it's not necessary to define too strictly what the purview of the Conservation Commission is, because you may in the future, want to spend more time on other things. And if you have the capacity to do that, I would empower you to do so. Beyond, of course, what right now the town is really considers the
So
mandated responsibilities.
I'm thinking then that it can be an about us landing page that includes core functions like the bylaws, the ERF management, but then a lot of the sort of other things. And if we have like a trapping policy, a link to a trapping policy, if we helped Simon write the rules for the habitat disturbance assessment contractor. But like, I don't know if that's something we need to link to, or just a reference to a section of the bylaw that we had a hand in.
Sounds like an example of what we do regarding the bylaws is that we
Yeah.
facilitate and review habitat disturbance assessments to support the development review process.
Yeah.
What if to kind of help, it seems like we're trying to sort of create some sort of summary structure for like what we do. What if it was like planning and outreach versus development review? And planning and outreach includes like ERF stuff, education, whatever else,
Trail.
managing our trails.
Yeah.
And then the development review stuff is just everything that we do to support pre-app and discretionary permits and specific plans. Would also fall under that because they are whatever amendments to our bylaws for specific parcels.
Right.
I think that seems like a.
Yeah, that's a good place to start.
Development review.
Yeah.
Plan.
That's, I think that, as you may remember, Dave, you know, both Daves. The development review part is a pretty strict, you know, outlined way, but if you're jumping into this committee new, it's daunting. I mean, you don't even know, what do you mean, you got a pre-app, you got a post-app, you got, you know, all the, so it'd be nice to outline the pieces, so somebody coming in would see, okay, first we have to look at it from this perspective, then it goes back to DRD, then it comes back to us, you know, all these different. I think
Yeah.
that's the most
I agree.
confusing piece. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I think, you know, even just like a flow chart of how that works, because that is depending on the time of year, that can take up a lot of our time, and it's important too, very important.
Yeah, great. Okay, so I think this is a good time to pause. Let's see, Monday coming in morning. We have the pre-app review ostensibly beginning at 8:15.
Oh, wow, it's 8:20.
And
I need to leave at 8:50 on the dot, just.
Okay. So does this seem like a good place to kind of wrap up this conversation? I feel like that was actually very productive in terms of we know where we can host this. And we have a pretty good sense of the kinds of materials that we'd like to start pulling together. And so I think in terms of my next steps, it's kind of identifying like what already exists, like what can just be cross-linked to another place on the website, what already exists that can just be uploaded. And then what doesn't exist. So what might we need people to sit down and do some drafting or writing, or myself included in that. And I can try to start putting all that information
Thank you.
together.
I think that sounds like a great plan.
Yes.
I agree. Thanks, Dave. And one additional thought I had would be to just scan through the last, I don't know, 3 or 4 years of our the Conservation Commission's annual reports, and just to look through there, because that'll give you an idea of what we felt was important to highlight to the town for the work that we did in those particular years.
Yeah. Okay, I won't start with 1988 and read sequentially. Go back.
Although if you really.
Well, I mean, if you want to do like a timeline, back in 1988, this is what was important to the Conservation Commission.
Maybe that's what's in the safe, is all of those old reports.
Yeah.
And the people who wrote them.
Oh.
Marvin. The time capsule.
I can see it live.
Okay, do we have the applicant on the Zoom at this
Not
point?
yet.
I wouldn't have made that comment if we did. We want people to.
Who's
come talk to
listening?
us. Yeah.
Remember, this is recorded.
Very good, very good. Got a whole bunch of unrelated links open now, so I gotta close that. Okay, I am not seeing the
30 more seconds.
They're at the bottom.
They're at the very bottom of the
Oh,
page.
great, thank you.
Yeah. The attachment, and next time I will put them right in the agenda itself.
Do we want to talk about future agenda items until such time as we have somebody?
So let's just make sure, so I attached the narrative letter, the site plans that were given to us for the application, and then the draft report. Let me move this. The draft report that we will talk about in just a little bit.
Did we actually have some questions about the history here? Do we know, why is it not in the old site? I just help me get back up to speed on why it's not.
Yeah,
where we thought it was gonna be.
I have too many things open.
Oh, so this is a new parcel?
Yeah, so
So they own
the
it yet?
first part of the wetlands clarifies that. So state wetlands performed a redelineation of the 432 Redmond Road project site, which was the proposed original site, which you reviewed. And during that delineation, they remapped a significant portion of it as wetlands, which is effectively killed the project on that parcel.
Do they own it? So they bought it and now it's basically like
They
unusable?
already own.
I do not know, I assume.
Yeah, I think that's
they
over
already
here,
owned it.
Dave.
So they
I
purchased
think
a new,
it's more wetland is.
It was on the right, it was on the
Yeah,
right
it
as
was
you
on
go
the
down,
right,
just,
yeah.
you know where the
The
second,
old site was like,
it was directly across from the
Further down.
second,
Oh.
the second entrance, you know how there's like a Y going into Global Foundries? And there's one entrance that they use, and then the second entrance further down toward the dump. They haven't been using, it's like
Mhm.
blocked off, it was directly across from that
Yeah,
second
maybe I'm
entrance.
confused.
The
then.
old
It'd be nice to.
here's Redmond Road. The old site was here.
yeah,
Right there.
Mhm.
yeah.
So that was before the Vermont Electric Co-op thing.
Yeah, I mean, it was unfortunate.
Hey, Dave, can you share your screen?
Yes, thank you for reminding that.
Okay, so. Does that help, Eric?
Yeah, it's unfortunate from a couple of different angles,
Mm.
and
It was the one right down, yeah,
Yeah,
that's what it is.
So that has wetlands.
I remember looking.
yeah, it had a number, so there was a active wetland delineation, they're good for 5 years, and the plan called for a long access road that kind of crossed those wetlands and worked within those parameters. And then in the process of working out sort of approvals, state DEC made the decision that conditions had changed and it made sense to get a new wetland delineation. And that new wetland delineation is what significantly increased the area that was coded as wetlands to the degree to which the development no longer worked on the site.
Okay.
So the new parcel that we're going to look at today is further down Redmond Road. Is this parcel right
Yeah.
here, which has been purchased by CSWD.
And it's more upland.
It's
so it's-
almost completely upland except for, ravines and gullies and this very conspicuous like cut area that was probably dug into to build a railroad at some point.
Oh, yeah, interesting.
Have you been to this site, Dave?
I've not, but I've done a decent amount of just remote review.
Yeah.
That looks like what my Google Maps review was too, and it's kind of confusing, but it does look like that is aerial photography from stick season. And so I do think that if it were summer, that would be fully forested.
Oh, yeah, that's what
Yeah.
the staff report says.
Oh, yeah, it's a fully forested site.
Okay,
No,
it was just a little confusing because it wasn't identified as a significant wildlife habitat.
it is identified as significant.
The map is hard to read, it is mostly SWHA or travel corridor,
Okay.
yeah,
Oh, that makes sense.
and, yeah, and.
So why would it be a travel corridor? Is that the gullies that you were referring to, Dave?
Yeah, I'm bringing my ARC project. I can show you a close up of the topography better than the online
Or
maps
just a
can.
general corridor along the
Uh,
river could include that corner of it at least.
But while we're waiting for. Let me actually, I'm just gonna take a quick peek at my email, make sure I don't have any notes from. Where you know. Yeah. My email inbox is recorded for posterity. Just trying to make sure I don't miss a note from Greg.
I don't think your screen is shared right now.
No, you're good. You're good, Dave. You're not sharing screen right now.
Okay, good.
Yeah, so he was supposed to be here. in
Just trying to start.
15.
Yeah, just transparent. So yeah, he was intending to be here at 8:15. I was trying to, when WVPD canceled, I suggested we meet a little earlier. Just so we're not rushed on time.
Well, that's okay. I mean, we're getting familiar with what this
Yeah, I think that's good.
site is.
Yeah,
So
Sounds
so, yeah,
better.
we can continue this conversation while we're waiting. And I can give you a little more. So we'll look at this again with the applicant, but. You were asking about the significant wildlife habitat. So here's the map as it pertains to significant wildlife habitat.
the green is the SWA.
Remember SWA includes wildlife core habitats and wildlife travel corridors. And so the whole parcel is essentially mapped as wildlife core habitat because this whole area is
Yeah,
contiguous forest.
The entire thing, yeah.
Now, the travel corridors were, mapped using remotely sensed data. What just happened there? just made this full screen. Sorry, my tech.
Running off of one screen
Right.
is different than.
Yeah, running it off of one screen is just a little more challenging here. Eric, are you still seeing?
I'm seeing, yes, you are
Okay.
sharing your screen. Yep.
Okay, so yeah, the travel corridor mapping looked at topography and land cover together. And so, for example, I believe, the reason a polygon like this would have been captured, as far as my understanding is that, this is all steep steep wall, there's some wetland down here. And animals not gonna climb up here, they're gonna go, up
The
through
general
this
grade.
area, or they're gonna go down through here.
Unless they're hardcore.
Unless they're
Right.
hardcore.
Unless they're
And
fractured, right.
and remember, that's part of the reason why we have HTAs is because, what you can predict and infer from remotely sensed data can be very accurate, but on the ground investigation will often reveal other things. So that's currently the proposed development site is mapped within this little
Okay,
extension of the
so
travel corridor.
That's what I didn't see last night so that is the superimposed map.
Yes, that's the
So-
superimposed
Yeah.
map.
The
of-
green is SWHA.
So do we, do we favor conserving core habitat or travel corridor? I mean,
Well,
like certainly what they're proposing is a huge impact on travel corridor. But not as much on core habitat. I mean, I don't know, what do we?
Well,
do we have
isn't-
to decide
it's all
which one's
core.
more important?
Isn't it all core habitat?
it is
It's
all
green.
core habitat,
Okay.
so the.
That's just also this part. of the
Exactly,
corridor,
the
so-
impact, that's so this whole area is washed in
Okay,
green.
so it's
Um,
a pretty big impact on habitat,
is.
huge.
Yeah, and that's why
You can't
there's,
get much worse, can you?
that's why there's a kind of
Controversy. You think they
casual
would have
staff
not
suggestion.
bought it yet until they found out what they
Yeah.
could do on it.
That's why there's a sort of cautious staff recommendation that if the site could be moved south, at least it would be more likely to avoid. Highly trafficked habitat as opposed to,
But I thought it was all habitat.
it is, but the travel corridors identify areas where it's most likely that animals are moving through.
right,
And even if they don't live there, they're using it as a
So
trout
more
stone, but the
important
HGA would have to be done to really go out and confirm.
Big
that-
time.
Yeah,
yeah, so you'll see this is one of the site plans.
Yeah,
And this one that they have includes soil. And so these orange dashed lines are different soil categories. You'll notice that the currently proposed site is basically here. And this is all former farmland with consistent soil properties. So it may be an option to shift it farther south, which on this orientation is to the left.
Oh, I see.
There wouldn't be,
This way.
I mean, they'll clarify, there may be
There we go.
yeah.
other concerns, but that factor would not be.
That's great.
All right,
so we see that Greg Dixon has just joined, is Greg the applicant?
Greg is the engineer representing the applicant.
Okay, great. So the commission was just getting familiar with the new site location. And I think we're waiting for the applicant to confirm that they're ready, and we can get into the staff briefing.
Yep. Sorry, guys. I think I was sitting on a wrong Zoom for the better part of 10 minutes, but
Oh, sorry about that.
no, I clicked on the wrong one. So, but yeah, I'm ready to get going. Again, I apologize for being a little late.
No worries, welcome.
morning.
Greg.
Morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
We're right back to the original schedule that we had, so it's all good.
It would have taken us that long just to orient about where we were. Anyways, we got a little bit of a update on why we're back at pre-app and why the site location has changed. So let's take it from there.
Greg, is anyone else from CSWT team joining us this morning?
I don't believe so. So I think it's just me.
All right, sounds good.
Would you like
So-
me to give a little bit of backstory, or have you guys already
Sure,
discussed?
yeah, go ahead.
Well, in general, I think you recall I was probably here right about the same time last year for the project on 432. In it might have even been a little earlier in the year, because the season for looking at wetlands hadn't opened yet. And we had planned to have Tina Heath back out on the project in the spring of 2024 to take a look at that 432 project. And when they went back out, the fields hadn't been mowed in probably about 2 growing seasons. And basically after they took a look at it with the new fauna from the lack of haying, it sort of pushed it into more of the wetland category, and the majority of that site was deemed to be wetland, which didn't make it feasible to use that anymore. So we worked with you. Oh,
Yeah.
there
That's
was,
just sorry to hear that, Greg. That's happened to a few different applicants in Williston recently in the last few years, so.
yeah, I mean, it happens. We weren't trying to hide from it or anything like that. They just needed to make a determination, and the determination was made, and that project wasn't feasible. So then we went into about a 3-month process of trying to find if there was a better place to put this, because if there wasn't, then we could have gone through actually permitting taking those wetlands if we couldn't find a space where we could actually build this. But thankfully we found this parcel just down the street from where we were, sort of at the bottom of the hill near the railroad tracks. It was not owned by CSWD. They had to purchase it from Heinsberg Sand and Gravel. So we went through that whole process. I believe the actual purchase just happened maybe a month or 2 ago. In that meantime, I was doing a little bit of preliminary research and review and design and stuff like that, but really we haven't hit the ground. We hit the ground running maybe about 2 months ago on this parcel. So now, where we're here, we did delineate wetlands at the minimum, kind of before the winter happened. That was kind of the first step that CSW took with the former property owner. We found the big wetlands that obviously Redmond Road already kind of cuts through, that low point before you go into the transfer station on both sides of the road. And that also interconnects with another larger one, as you can see to the north of the project, that runs along the railroad. I believe that was sort of created from the impounding of water when the railroad was put in. It also kind of looks like material might have been dug out of that area to actually build the railroad. So, and there also is another wetland kind of to the south of the project, in that ravine area right there.
What are the different colored lines indicating? It sounds like they're wetlands.
Purple is the edge of travel corridors.
Yeah, so purple is the Williston SWHA travel corridors layer, which it's not shaded, so it is a little tricky to tell.
It just looks
And
like lines.
Greg, I think it's possible that the green line, the polygon that you got access to, is not the same as the official Williston map. So I can show you that, but that's what the green line here was showing, is the habitat core areas. But I believe our polygon is different.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, regardless, we are sort of taking a substantial amount of clearing to put in this project. The whole area down there is currently forested. There is a existing sort of very lightly maintained gravel-ish farm road that kind of cuts through, as you can see, through the project. And that's also how you enter onto the site right now. There's some big boulders that kind of block the path from cars getting out there. But that's kind of the only development on the site right now.
All right, well, thanks for that background, Greg. Really appreciate it. So I'll jump into and walk us through our staff report here, the sort of draft findings and conclusions for the Conservation Commission, and point you to a couple of discussion areas, and we'll go from there.
Okay.
All right, so this is a pre-application review for the materials recovery facility located at this new site, as Greg explained, on Redmond Road, which is in the industrial east zoning district for Williston. The parcel is about 38.5 acres, and it's currently in a state of closed canopy second growth forest. This whole proposed parcel was open farmland, dating back to probably around 1944, when it was most likely abandoned and returned to second growth forest. There was likely a late 19th century homestead on the site, and it is crossed by those woods roads, which are actually correspond to historic farm roads. So the development would be served by one curb cut off Redmond Road, approximately the same area as Greg mentioned to that current access point to that historic road network. A short access road of about 200 feet is proposed, which would provide adequate sort of natural buffer on the sides of the project. Project also includes stormwater infrastructure. There's 2 proposed infiltration basins, parking for 45 vehicles plus staging areas, scale utility connections, and then it would be served by municipal water and on-site septic. So I will I'll return to sort of the individual areas that pertain to Conservation Commission review in a second, but I'll kind of jump to the end here and summarize just the overall findings with regards to taking a look at this property and how it overlaps with conservation impacts that are delineated in the development review bylaws. So subject parcel is designated as a medium priority for conservation ERF prioritization map. The parcel is within a significant wildlife habitat area due to its designation as both core habitat and with presence of wildlife travel corridors on the SWHA official map. And development is currently proposed within both of those feature types. Subject parcel is within a secondary foreground viewshed area. You'll see that it's a very slight overlap with the currently proposed clearing envelope, but that'll be a small point for discussion. And the project is about 8 acres of clearing, so it's not considered low-risk development for watershed health. And it's not anticipated to impact any farmlands of local importance. There's no special flood hazard areas. There's no unique natural community mapped, and there's no known uncommon, rare, threatened, or endangered species or communities. So some preliminary recommendations in addition to anything you decide on today. Of course, an HDA must be prepared by a qualified wildlife biologist, but we can get that going after this pre-app. There is a small class 3 wetland that was mapped on site, so we can discuss how that relates to the Conservation Commission opportunity to provide a recommendation. So this is a draft language, but we'll return to that and decide if you deem it necessary. And the applicant must submit a professionally prepared runoff and erosion control plan since it's not deemed a low risk development. Okay, so we'll jump back up to individual areas to consider and discuss. So ERF prioritization, you can see a snippet of our prioritization map here. This parcel is coded as a medium conservation priority. However, in the industrial, commercial industrial developments, there's not the same growth management conditions. So there's not really an opportunity to weigh in with regards to ERF for this review. There are no desired sidewalks, multi-use paths, or trails that are currently marked on Williston maps in this area. So we'll skip over to the first area that is an opportunity for discussion, which is the significant wildlife habitat area. So here you'll see a superimpose. I took the plans and matched that to the parcel there. So you can see the current location that's proposed for development, those 8 acres. And it currently lies within that significant wildlife habitat area, both core habitat. You'll see this area is kind of washed in green, which is the polygons for wildlife core habitat. Corresponds to that largely forested condition in this corner of northwest Williston, running all the way up to the blue dotted line here is the Winooski River center line. And then the purple hash marks are what was mapped as wildlife travel corridors on the SWHA map. So the first area to kind of discuss here is because that envelope is proposed within both, is there an opportunity to mitigate those impacts? Noting that most of the northern portion of this parcel, in between that wetland at the north that Greg mentioned and the ravine kind of in the middle, is flat former farmland with consistent soil properties according to the map. So Greg, you'll have an opportunity to kind of explain a little more if there may be certain conditions that led you to select that particular site. And if you want to discuss whether there are other options in terms of mitigating that travel corridor impact, I encourage you to do so.
Thanks, Dave. I guess I have a question, but we'll open it up for the commissioners if they have any top of mind. My initial question looking at this overlay is, I guess, I think we need to consider that the travel corridors may be bendable. Like these are not hard lines. The habitat assessment, I think, should sort of be the primary indicator that we're looking for as far as where the travel corridors would be. My question for Greg is actually twofold. First is, you heard Dave's summary of the review here. How movable is your overall property, and like where things would be developed and where things would be disturbed? And then my question on top of that is, in addition to the structural elements that we're sort of seeing on the map overlay here, there's a lot of staging areas and there's a lot of like other things that were sort of discussed in your last pre-app. How much actual clearing is expected to take place in this parcel? Let's just say that.
So I'll just jump in real quick on that second point.
Okay.
Sorry, Greg, before letting you go. So what you see on the map here, this is I took the plan, the site plan, and superimposed that. So what you're seeing here is the overall proposed envelope.
Mhm.
And you can't necessarily make out the details at this scale, but the building is actually right here, this rectangle. And so all of those features that you mentioned are what you're seeing here. There's a stormwater basin. I can switch over to the
Must be a parking lot too.
the site plan, and we can zoom in a little bit so that you can see that more clearly. And the
Great.
total proposed acreage of clearing is 8 acres to accommodate all of those features. Okay, Greg, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and it might be reduced further too. I'm doing the stormwater design right now, and I was kind of overshowing those basins preliminarily to make sure I had enough room, but I do think there's opportunity there to shrink those, which I'm working on now. So yeah, we're not proposing any further clearing or staging than what is shown within that sort of 8 acres or less area. The aggregate storage that we had on the last discussion, sort of that the processed glass storage area is actually out behind the building now. We kind of shoved it out back and brought it a little closer to the building. We don't have the long access road that we had on the last project. That access road was basically to further mitigate the wetlands that we thought we had last time, and also use the existing curb cut. So that was the reason for the long road last time. We don't have those wetlands on this project to avoid, so we can have a lot shorter interconnection with Redmond Road. So basically, right now, what you're seeing on the paper is all we're requesting to do. As far as how I positioned it on the property, my intent was to kind of use the flattest and relatively lowest part of the property to, one, kind of preserve the rest of the property for possible future use, and or preserve the property for just trying to keep the less sprawl, project sprawl out throughout the property. This is the flattest part of the area. It's where the existing road goes, and it's probably likely where the any old use was performed on the parcel. And it was also more than 100 feet away from the wetland to the north and the wetlands kind of to the east. So I kind of shoved it up into the corner to preserve as much of the bulk of the property as I could. So it's about a 38.5 acre parcel, and we'll be using about 8 of it.
So to Dave's question, it sounds like, from these various factors, it may be sort of optimal in some ways. But I think it would be helpful for the commission to know, is it potentially feasible to, depending on what the HDA discovers and all that, is it potentially feasible to take this envelope and, instead of backing it up to this, close to this top wetland, is it possible to shift it down and back it up, towards the top of this ravine here where it is still flat, or flatter?
The soils that we found over there are not as good for infiltration. So if we did do that shift, I would have to kind of change. That was another issue. We're proposing 2 infiltration basins at the current moment. We found really good soils where those are currently located with more than 4 feet of separation from the groundwater. Oddly enough, as you move up the hill and kind of to the southwest of the property, there might even be some little symbols where we did I don't know if they're on there yet, but we were looking to actually position the wastewater over in that corner. Unfortunately, we found water at about 16 inches, kind of odd, and the soils just seem to be a different type of soil on that side, where the building is positioned right now is more sands. As you kind of move closer to that ravine area, they get to be a little bit heavier soils, more silts, I don't think it's clays, I think it's mostly silts. And it seems to be holding up the water a little bit more and infiltration would be less possible in that location. Also, it jumps up in elevation, not substantially, but it would create more removal of earth. I'm not saying that the other item 2 is CSWD purchased the entire 38 acres. They don't have any current plans to expand, but if there were to be an area they would expand, they might move into this area. I think if we shifted the building this way, they also might look into moving into the area to the north. But this was just the better position for me engineering wise mostly because of the soils and how flat it was. But that was kind of my reasoning for putting it where it is.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I don't really have an opinion on the positioning because I really do think that the HDA is needed to make any sort of determination on whether it's even worth and whether it's better or worse to move it. Because the overlays are really they're like a best guess based on the topography and the cover. So we think that where it's currently positioned is sort of squarely in where wildlife most likely is traveling. But that's only going to be confirmed when we actually get an HDA. And I'm interested when we get to it to talk about the class 3 wetlands because I couldn't quite tell where those were.
Yeah, all right, so we'll move on in the interest of time here. So that'll certainly be a major focus. The HDA is searching for concrete evidence of are there areas that would be more favorable for wildlife movement than others? All right, there's no UNCs on site. There are statewide important farmlands mapped, but nothing that comes up on the LISA map, which is the one that is relevant to Williston development bylaws. Opportunity for a brief discussion here. So there's a secondary foreground polygon mapped along the frontage of the Winooski River. And you can see that there's a small overlap here with the site. Does not look like a major impact, but it's an opportunity for the WCC to ask question or weigh in on potential viewshed impacts. Emily and I spoke about this site, and as near as we can tell, this was probably mapped because of views across the Winooski River into Williston.
Why not on the river?
Or on
a canoe
as a canoe.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So
You probably can see the train tracks but I don't even know that you'd be able to see up the ravine, up above that steep section where they had done some.
If you're on the.
Sure, I'm not sure that you'd be able to see it from the bottom of the hill.
I'm not terribly familiar with that particular angle, but I mean, I guess that's the question for Greg is,
What's
you
the
know,
north side?
will the site involve clearing such that like if you can see the river from the site after you're clearing, then that means anyone traveling on the river or
See you.
you know can see you, right? That's the old stage that's the old stage adage. If you can see them, they can see you.
Yeah, there's a really steep bank, kind of west of this project area that I do think will kind of provide good cover if one was sitting on a canoe down in the river. They would sort of have to look, and same goes for if you're standing sort of in that back area, you have another probably 100 feet of flat area before you would look down to the river. So I think the land mass itself might mask a good majority of it. I can't say with certainty that you wouldn't see sort of the opening of cleared area in that location. I don't think you would see it from the roads across Winooski. I drive that pretty often, and you can see kind of the hump of the landfill kind of out back, but then you kind of lose all view of the railroad tracks until you get closer to seeing the bridge where it crosses the Winooski. And so I do think we're also keeping probably more than 200 or more, maybe even 300 feet of woods between us and the railroad tracks. So I do think sort of views from the other side of Winooski are probably not going to be the biggest issue. The only location where I don't know if there could be an opportunity to see is kind of once you turn the corner on the Winooski River in a canoe underneath the railroad bridge and then kind of look up left. Is that close enough? But I do think there's a substantial elevation drop in there that I think would probably hide the majority of any views.
This is all forested and it's been forested
Yeah.
for significant time.
And I
Where's the
think
landfill?
because of the grades, it
On the
could
right.
never be used.
I'm sorry, what was that, Greg?
I think because of the grades in that location that we were just discussing, that little sliver, that's actually owned by Global Foundries and goes up to the railroad tracks. Because of the grades in that location, I don't think it could ever be used for development.
Right. Yeah, I guess my when I read this, that was a concern is that you know, right now this is fully forested section. It has the appearance, if you were on the river, to sort of be a contiguous stretch of sort of almost rural, you know, forest. It would be a shame if there was a postage stamp scar, you know, clearly visible. So like I hear everything that you're saying, but I appreciated sort of the call out in this because I do think that could be a concern, but we can keep moving. I guess I don't know if that translates into a recommendation or anything, but I guess I would like to revisit that when
Yeah.
that final site is
Well, I believe that
identified.
I believe that we may be able to add to the HDA to get information pertaining to this. Even though that's not Habitat directly, they may be able to weigh in. So I can confirm if that is something that can be included in the HDA or not. And in any case, we can go get more information about this.
We can go take some photographs from the Essex side too, to see what does it look like from there.
Yeah, the street view, the Google Street View, from
Yeah.
the road at least was pretty clear, like it's looking at a forested hill across the river. So like that would be my other concern is that, you know, from that further distance, like the point about being on river, looking up at a steep bank, you might not see it, but that point that
The further you get away.
the further you get away, you could sort of see a scar hole, in the canopy. But, anyways,
Okay.
is there any recommendation or finding on that point in below, Dave?
No, there's no particular recommendation or finding, other than just the finding is that the proposed building envelope overlaps with this mapped feature.
Okay.
And so that simply gives, opportunity for, Williston Conservation Commission to provide recommendation to the DRB pertaining to impacting the
Yeah,
watershed.
I like the idea of having the HDA sort of drive the thing, some kind of assessment of like,
Yeah.
what would the visual impact be?
Yeah, HDA or otherwise, we can,
Yeah.
that can certainly be a
Thanks,
recommendation.
Reed.
And to go, I just want to make one more comment, which is when you get a chance to talk about the class 3 wetlands, because there's potential for us to make a recommendation at the discretionary permit level to shift the siting of the building envelope. I think it would be wise to get that class 3 wetland delineation as part of it, so that we don't accidentally move it from something that's habitat to something that's wetland with.
Okay.
Great.
Well, you'll see it's pretty small and
Okay.
clearly delineated already. Okay.
All right.
So just jumping down the interest of time, right to that section, so, Greg, if you could
Thanks, Reed.
send a copy of the delineation, that's something that we would love to see. Is required for the discretionary permit phase. The proposal disturbs 8 acres, you mentioned, so it's not low risk, that's the what triggers the need for a erosion prevention and sediment control plan. And then in terms of wetlands protection, so Conservation Commission, when it comes to class 2 wetlands, things are pretty clear. Those are regulated by the state, 50-foot buffers. When it comes to class 3 wetlands, there's more ambiguity. In the Williston Development Bylaws, Conservation Commission has an opportunity to, potentially weigh in on things like adding buffers to class 3. The requirement is that a class 3 wetland needs to be shown to have significant functions. So I'll show you the area that has been marked as class 3, but one of your options is to request, that if the wetland delineation did not include a functional assessment, to get a functional assessment added to that, during the HDA.
What does that mean, functional assessment?
A functional assessment is basically a big checklist for a wetland. It looks at 10 different important functions that wetlands serve, things like flood control, habitat for unique species, opportunities for education and recreation. And there's a big checklist that the wetland scientist goes down that says, this wetland does have this or does not. And so that can qualify a wetland as having a significant important function. That essentially bumps a class 3 up to being treated more like a class 2.
Thank you, and I kind of see the design as almost treating like that class 3 wetland as like a landscaping feature.
Yeah.
Between the parking and the
Building.
built structure.
Yeah, Greg, do you want to kind of
Yeah, there's.
explain or
It's all
reiterate kind of what
bounded by
the
something. Yeah,
what the
it's-
treatment is of the class 3 wetland on site?
So, I mean, the class 3 wetland is 380 square feet. So, I mean, it's not exactly a large, a large feature. What I think is actually happening in that location is that there is a spring that kind of comes up in that location. As you can see from the drainage, the existing drainage, it kind of drains back down into the towards the other larger wetland. And so I think there's a spring action happening in there, which is kind of keeping it a little wet. What we are doing in the area is just avoiding it. We're avoiding the disturbance of it. So we will sort of leave it as is. Right now, the grades down to that are about a 5-on-1. So very shallow grades, still mowable grades, but we could stay out of that location. We actually already have a pipe designed underneath the roadway in that area, so it can continue to drain, or it can fill up and actually expand its wetland in that area. It'll kind of create a little pocket in next to the building. I think the additional area provided, I would suspect that whole area would kind of fill in as a wetland, and we could allow it to grow in with wetland species. Obviously, the big change and difference in what we're doing is right now it's a forested wetland, and after the forest will not exist anymore. But it does have the opportunity to fill in with wetland plants and actually become a bigger wetland itself.
Right, and just clarify, that's because currently it drains out naturally, and with the grading plan, you're essentially sort of impounding it.
Yeah, that's what.
Yeah.
So we are impacting that's, it's impounded on all sides. I
But
mean,
you're gonna add a culvert, is that what I heard?
Yep. So we'll add a culvert so it doesn't impound it to create like a pond.
So is the actual wetland is just that little polygon with the dots in it?
Yeah, that's what was delineated.
Oh, for some reason I thought it was the bigger area.
Oh, yeah,
No.
no, it's,
But it is being impacted from the standpoint of literally some built environment surrounding it.
yeah,
So surface flow would be minimized, I would think. It's not gonna have any sheet flow off of there or anything, because there's either a road, a building, or a parking lot
Sure.
around.
Right. It sounds like you're on the site. Is that question, was the class 3 identified from the site visit, or was the class 3 identified from a town map or something that we provided?
from the site visit.
Okay,
So
so you're,
it's a delineated feature.
got it.
I mean, could that
And
road going around the building, is that required for
Well-
egress or something? Or
Yes.
could we not put that road in or something to allow for more natural flow out of that area? I don't know.
I mean, I don't know, like, I understand natural flow, but I mean, we would still set that at the pipe elevation for the stormwater outfall to be pretty much at its natural state. So it wouldn't impound additional water to create a different type of wetland. So in actuality, water still leaves this area like it would in its natural state.
Yeah.
It's not being
Said
further.
it's been 100% impounded by us or by humans. Yeah, maybe.
so just
So it
to,
can't
just
be
to
near natural.
clarify,
So-
for this discussion, so what the Conservation Commission has the opportunity to do is provide, right now, simply provide a recommendation that if this class 3 wetland has not been assessed for significant functions, that it be so in the HDA. And if that is the case, so the DRB may, upon the recommendation of the Conservation Commission, require that the class 3 wetland with significant functional value, so if found to that, remain in natural vegetation. This plan that Greg has proposed is essentially to do that. Certainly the hydrology change is something that could be discussed further if you'd like. But the other thing is that the DRB may require a buffer, again, provided that a wetland is found to have significant functional value. Upon recommendation of the Conservation Commission, require a buffer above class 3 wetlands that is a 50-foot buffer or a larger buffer, because there are currently, there's no regulations around class 3 in terms of buffer size. So that's essentially the opportunity to weigh in here is we can have the HDA perform that assessment if it has not been done already. And then upon finding that, when we move on to the discretionary permit phase, you can provide the recommendation to the Conservation Commission to require a buffer of a certain size up to 50 feet around that. So just to kind of clarify what the parameters are around this discussion.
Thank you. And I know that we're at time, but I do have a question about the hydrology, and I think this is also getting to what Gary was observing, which is that a fully contained seep, we'll call it, if you're surrounding its entire infiltration area in concrete, then it may just no longer be a wetland anymore. And so that to me is why, if it's found to be a significant class 3 wetland by the habitat disturbance assessment, I would like to talk about like how the site design affects the hydrology of that, because a buffer alone may not solve for that problem, right? And so I also recognize that the reason why that seep exists is possibly for the same reason that the infiltration is preferable for that site, is that those sands are potentially, better. But that's why I think the hydrology and understanding the hydrology, if this is an important class 3 wetland, is needs to be understood.
Okay. So
I need to go. Apologies. I'll see you guys in a couple weeks.
All right, thanks, Eric.
Okay, so, I believe that puts us below quorum. So this may need to be revisited.
I unfortunately, we just lost quorum.
Yeah, well, after 9, you can't expect. people to-
Right.
Exactly.
But I can also summarize the consensus of the findings today, which may be sufficient. Simply to have the consensus of the Conservation Commission in terms of moving forward with the HDA, et cetera. So the HDA, sounds like from the conversation today should focus on evidence of the of wildlife movement and corridors in that area. And it sounds like from this discussion that the functional assessment of the class 3 wetland should be included in HDA. If that has not already been done, Greg, by the wetland scientists who perform the delineation.
Yeah, I'm not sure if he had or not. The size
Okay.
of the wetland itself
Yeah.
normally doesn't jump up to that level of review.
Okay,
And then if there is the possibility to reference the hydrology of that class 3 assessment, I think that would be helpful, because that could very much impact the size of the buffer that's needed in order to protect it.
Yeah.
Say simply.
okay, great. So that's the consensus of the commission here today, and I can record that in the minutes, even though there's not an official movement to send these recommendations. Thank you all for your time today. I know that was a little tight. Greg, thank you for coming in today and having these conversations with the commission. I will follow up to find out if there needs to be any follow-up since we were below quorum, but I believe simply having the consensus of the conversation today is enough to kind of move us through in terms of transmitting these recommendations to the DRB for the DRB session next week.
Okay.
All right,
Great.
thank you all.
Thanks, Greg.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. And we're adjourned.
Hopefully it's gonna get warmer.
Here's your info too.
It's gonna do-
So there is, if you didn't get a chance to look at it.
Yeah, that's right, tomorrow or something. Yeah.
There's so many things going on here. I have too many windows up. Let me